Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and how everybody else in this pub is so phony. At a corner table by the fire are three people. One of them is puffing a cigar and chuckling about how everybody in the pub is stupid except for him. And that's me, Matthew Mellema. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to help you connect the great story, the great stories, in our own stories in order to understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. All right, so I'm going to start off with a couple personal anecdotes. Bear with me because these will all come together, I think. Okay, first off, while the rest of my classmates were, socializing with each other, going on dates during high school, I was studying, okay? And because of this, I was named the salutatorian of my graduating class. I know, it's a cool thing. I'm just a regular guy, okay? But as part of being a salutatorian, I got to give a little speech during graduation. And I had to write my speech and present it to my principal to make sure it could get approved. And the first draft of my speech got rejected because it was too cynical. And I kind of wore this as a badge of pride for years afterwards. Fast forward, it was maybe about a year or so later, I encounter Catcher in the Rye for the first time. I have this very distinct memory of reading it outside on my trampoline in my parents' backyard and thinking, yeah, this Holden Caulfield guy, he friggin' gets it. Yeah, everyone else is phony. And then fast forward a few more years, longtime listeners of this podcast will know that I came very close to having a memoir published about how I was sort of a recovering cynic toward the evangelical culture. So suffice it to say, cynicism is weighing heavily on my mind now and for the past several decades. Cynicism is one of those things where, I don't know, you know how I almost picture like a gambling addict where you're kind of afraid to walk past the casino because you're afraid the sound of all the different machines will trigger everything. That's kind of how I feel because I love being cynical. I friggin' love it. That intellectual rush you get from feeling like everyone is stupid except for you. Whew! Shoot that right into my veins, but I know it's bad. Right? Okay. So a lot of literature has this sort of cynical edge to it. And that's what I want to talk about today because when you start to list stories that are cynical, some seem to still be very good and hold up. Others don't seem to hold up past the age of like 18 or 19. And I'm wondering why that is. What is the difference between a good cynical story and a bad cynical story? Luckily, to join in this conversation are the two most cynical people I know, Mandy and Evangeline. Mandy, how are you doing?
I'm just wondering where your red hunting cap is because you were channeling Holden there.
Oh, so hard. So hard. I remember reading the book this is friggin' what literature is. Oh, this is what it's all about.
I had a very different experience reading that book.
Well, how old were you when you read it?
Oh, like 40.
Yeah, that might explain it. Yeah. Evangeline, how are you doing?
Well, I've been better, but I can't expect, very much because life is meaningless after all.
I saw this, along those lines, I saw this great t-shirt on the internet somewhere. It said, Holden Caulfield thinks you're phony, which...
Oh, I would buy that.
I would totally wear that. But anyway, I want to talk about cynical literature, like I said, but let's start off by defining some terms. But actually, let's not even define terms yet. Let's sort of take the temperature in the room. I already told you about my relationship with cynicism, where I love it, but I know it's bad for me. So, it's, you know how it is. Mandy, how do you feel about cynical stories? Are you drawn to them, or are you a decent person?
Wow, that's a trap. When you pitched this topic, for the podcast, I couldn't even think. I mean, obviously I thought of Catcher in the Rye, but I couldn't think of anything else. But then the more, I think there are certain cynical stories that I like, and I need therapy to figure out why I like some and not others. I'm not. Maybe you can help me figure that out in this podcast. What do you think?
I would love to.
Oh, thanks.
Let's make that the goal of the podcast.
Just to figure out Mandy.
Evangeline, how about you? Are you drawn to these stories?
I am not. I would say as I get older, though, that I am drawn to a certain acceptance or surrender.
That's a good, yeah.
And I don't know. I think that is a shade. Perhaps you could call it a shade of cynicism. Maybe.
Do you think it's because you understand that some people have cause to be cynical?
I think it's because I understand or see, I kind of call it the break in humanity. And acknowledging that it brings kind of a sort of peace. And I don't know that that's cynicism because it's, like I said, it's very peaceful. And it actually makes me, sure of that, the mending and the redemption that is to come and is coming is where our hope lies. So sorry, I'm going all serious.
So we are all writers here. So let's make that concrete. Well, what's an example that of like a story that you think illustrates that?
I don't have one right now because I'm kind of drawing on conversations that I've had recently with my brother. So it's more like a general, observation about the world at the moment. But let me think. I'll think about it. I'm kind of thinking like Shakespeare's tragedies a little bit, and even like weirdly, Taming of the Shrew.
Oh yeah, that is very cynical.
It is, isn't it?
It's so. It sounds like you're saying that when there is a ring of truth to the perspective, that's not something that repels you because you see it. You see that it's truth, and because you know of the coming restoration of all things, you can handle it.
Yeah, but it's hard to define.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
So sorry, I didn't mean to derail the kind of lighthearted vibe.
Well, actually, I've been sitting here because as we've been talking, I've been like, oh, and like thinking of other books I've read that probably would fall under the cynicism.
And so it sounds like, Evangeline, like you are saying you are drawn to works that sort of have an acknowledgement of human sort of shortcomings and frailty, but without maybe the mockery that you'd see in like a cynical work. Is that the distinction there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good word, mockery.
Yeah. We could, we've talked about it before, so I'll just throw it out there. We talked about The Sparrow. I think that's an example.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not cynical.
No.
That's what I haven't read yet. You guys keep telling me to.
You could see it being written a different way where it would be cynical, right?
Yeah.
Like the subject matter is right for it. It's just, it seems like the way it was written doesn't have that viewpoint. Does that sound right?
Well, I think the element of faith and the wrestling with faith, especially when he returns, that there's definitely shades of cynicism in there, but also like the sort of desperation to cling or to believe again. So
who is that by?
Mary Doria Russell.
I feel like every single episode, Evangeline, you mentioned The Sparrow, I mentioned Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. They're just like,
funny, yeah.
Well, it's funny.
It's going to be Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, or
exactly.
The Sparrow, which is funny. I mean, I think it's just because it sticks in my head. It's like I have read other things. I have.
Well, it's funny that
I read books
because as you were talking about The Sparrow, which I have not read, Piranesi came up in my head because
interesting.
That is like the opposite of cynicism.
Well, it's a character who starts off as a cynic and then loses that throughout the process, right?
Well, we don't see him being cynical.
Yes.
His presentation to us is the absolute absence of cynicism, which is what makes him so endearing, because that really kind of casts us, the reader, as we're kind of cynical, honestly, because we're like, clearly this guy is missing something.
Yeah.
You know.
And the framework of the novel is, you know,
perfect.
Yeah.
Susanna Clark, you're the best.
Yes.
But yeah, no, that is true, because he is presented, the main character, Piranesi, is presented as a completely character without cynicism, without guile.
Correct.
Just totally a sincere person.
And it wouldn't work any other way.
And we find out through, of course, story through flashbacks that he didn't always used to be that sort of person, that he became this person over time. And so, yeah, that's actually really interesting commentary on this whole cynicism attitude here. Yeah, so let's do this. I would like to get some definitions of what we talk about when we talk about cynicism. But again, we're authors here, right? We're not into abstract definitions. We believe, like Aristotle, that it's the particulars that lead us to knowledge of the absolutes. So let's do particulars here. Sorry if I just looped you all in as Aristotelians. But so let's give examples. When you think, what's the quintessential cynical work of literature?
Other than Catcher in the Rye?
well, yeah, let's start with that. So let's start with Catcher in the Rye. Yeah. Why do you think that's like a quintessential cynical story?
Because his viewpoint is just negative and untrusting. Is that a word? It is now. Throughout, he is just, he finds no hope or sincerity in anything that he looks at. And I just had a really hard time with that book. Yeah, I didn't want to hang out with him anymore.
And for listeners who, I mean, after that description, I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to go out and buy the book right away. But
yeah.
Basically, the premise is the narrator's like a 16-year-old kid. He's been kicked out of a series of really fancy prep schools, comes from a wealthy family, and he basically leaves school, goes on a jaunt to New York, and talks about how everyone else except for him is phony, right?
And I think one of the key issues, he comes from a wealthy family. He has all this privilege. And I think that is part of why all I could feel was annoyed. Because he was kicked out of the schools with just cause. I mean, his entire predicament is self-imposed. Whereas a contrast for me is Native Son by, can't remember his name right now. Gosh, dang it.
Richard something.
Wright? Was it Richard Wright?
I was going to say Richard Wright. You keep going. I'll look that up.
Because Native Son is brutal. It is a very difficult read.
It is Richard Wright.
Oh, yay. We were right.
Look at us piecing it together.
So that one was a brutal read. I would never read it again. I don't go around recommending it necessarily, but I am glad I read it. And it's like the total opposite of Holden Caulfield, because the premise there is he is a Black man who is falsely accused of something, of a horrific act. But then, because he knows he has no chance of anyone believing him, he goes on and commits all these other horrific acts. So he doesn't do the first one, but then he does all these others because he knows that everyone is going to blame him and he has no shot at justice. And so that's even more than cynicism. That's like despair.
That's nihilism, yeah.
Nihilism, yeah. So for me, thinking about those two different characters, why was I sympathetic, even though I was angry at Bigger? Bigger is the character's name in Native Son. Why, even though I was horrified at what Bigger was doing, why do I have more sympathy for him than I do for Holden Caulfield when Bigger is doing all these horrible things and Holden Caulfield is just whining.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, what does that say about me? But
so no, those are all valid points, and I resonate with a lot of you with a lot of the points there. Evangeline, do you have any strong Catcher in the Rye opinions to throw in the fray?
I've never read it.
Well,
that's okay.
If you read it past the age of like 20, you're probably going to hate it. But so
especially as a female.
Yeah. So I know for me, again, I mentioned in the intro how when I read it as a teenager, I was like, yeah, this resonates. Because again, I think Salinger, the author of Catcher in the Rye, does a good job of capturing how like a clever, precocious, observant teenager would view the world.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
There is a lot in that world, these sort of elite, sort of preppy high schools of that period, like the fancy rich kid in New England, that is worthy of being lampooned, right?
Yes.
And I will say I was kind of surprised when I found that Holden Caulfield has his strident defenders online, where if you cross Holden Caulfield, they will come at you.
What? Wow.
Because they're like, oh, I'm sorry. This kid has been suffering trauma, and I'm sorry he's not processing it well enough for, like that sort of thing.
Goodness.
So it's like, and so let's be, of course, just because you're, just because you're a rich kid, you can still have trauma.
No,
and all
I
that
don't
too.
hate Holden. Yeah. I just didn't want to listen to him anymore.
Yeah, but I will say I just went through. I had like a realization somewhere time in my early 20s. I was watching a TV show where they pointed this out. I was like, yeah, Holden's a spoiled brat.
Yes,
like, that's how he comes across to me, and I am wondering, is Catcher in the Rye just the sort of book that you should read as a teenager, then you grow out of? Is there a flaw in the story? Have I just changed as a person? If so, did I change for the better, for the worse? I don't know. What
I would say, and I say the same about Lord of the Flies, both of those should have been short stories. That's my opinion. Lord of the Flies, Catcher in the Rye should have been short stories, because I think there is value in both of them, and there's value in Holden Caulfield. Really, to me, Catcher in the Rye is Holden Caulfield hates himself. He's just aiming it at other people. Mm-hmm. I mean, I did teach high school. Anyway, at a private high school, so But I to me, it really was just how annoying it got over time. I mean, frankly.
And there's, I think another thing that bugs me about Holden Caulfield, again, as an adult, is I think what Salinger tried to do was portray Holden as like this rough around the edges kid who has a good heart down, and he sees what all of us adults don't see. And I think, maybe if you're being charitable, you could see that. But also there is there's sort of an underlying self-righteousness in Holden.
Yes.
Where it's like, I'm the only moral one here. You all suck. I'm the only good person here. You all suck and you're dumb.
But don't you think underneath that it really is that he doesn't like himself? Am I giving him too much credit? I never would have accused myself of giving Holden Caulfield credit.
I don't know if he does hate himself.
I only read it once.
I think he thinks pretty highly of himself.
Okay. I could be way wrong.
Yeah.
I read it over 10 years ago and I read it once. Mm-hmm. So
I could be the tiebreaker here, but
you could.
I can't, because
I'm not gonna make you read it.
Sorry.
So that is your quintessential, when you think cynical story.
When I think cynical, I think Catcher in the Rye. Right, for sure.
I'm going to do something right along those lines. So when I think cynical story, I think Catch-22. So this is one, it's been sort of on my long list for a while. Finally read it within the past year. And I will say, I went in expecting to really enjoy it. Because, it takes place during World War II, and it's basically this sort of absurdist look at sort of company of soldiers during World War II. And it's absurdist. It's lampooning everyone about the military, basically everyone. And I remember thinking about midway through the book, it's like, I hate this.
Yes.
Because it was just so relentlessly cynical.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one thing, and again, I've never been a soldier in World War II, but I imagine if you were, there'd be a lot of things like in the chain of command that are worthy of lampooning, right?
Yeah.
But the way that Catch-22 operates, it's basically literally everybody in the military is stupid except for the author.
Right.
And that's what you come across as. And it's really hard for me to get behind that.
Yeah, well, that one I read maybe 40 pages and then I was done. And I am one of those people, I will read a book that I hate. I read it all the way through. But that is one of 3 books I can think of that I have tried to read. I only tried that one once. I've tried the other ones multiple times. But I could not stand the guy. And I also could not figure out what the plot was at all. But Evangeline, I just silently asked you if you've read that one. Don't.
Well, and there were aspects of it that I did like. Like parts of the book were really funny.
Well, that was what I was about to.
Yeah.
I was about to ask you if you think maybe that's the key to successful cynical literature is humor.
Like I did think it was funny.
I didn't. I never got.
I
to
disliked
funny.
it despite like there were aspects of it that I liked, but overall I didn't like it for the reason I just mentioned.
Because when you were talking about like the cynicism of like being in the, military or whatever, what came up in my mind was MASH. Have you guys ever watched that TV show? MASH?
I have. It's not for me, but that's a longer
that
spiel.
Is Peter's favorite TV show.
I only know
of it.
Pieces of it.
Yeah. Oh, that song. You need to look up the lyrics to that song. They talk about cynicism. Anyway, that song is called Suicide is Painless.
Oh,
yeah.
Oops.
Anyway, so that is a very cynical TV show, but it's hilarious. And so maybe that's something that makes the cynicism go down easier.
Here's another distinction I think I have. Okay. So another criticism I have of Catch-22 is it's unclear to me what the moral center of the book is. Like, what is the point they're trying to make other than war is dumb? Like,
and then why did it have to be such a big book?
Yeah. It's like, to Joseph Heller, the author of Catch-22, is like, yeah,
short story.
War is awful, bro, but the Nazis, they haven't aged well. I think, we had a good reason for that one.
Yeah.
But other than possibly the point, war is dumb.
Yeah.
It's war is dumb, but I'm not.
Yeah. See, again, that could be a short story.
So that's
short.
That's not much of a message. Whereas for something like MASH, you do feel like there is sort of an underlying core there, where there's sort of a moral spine to it.
Humanity.
Yeah.
That's the key. That is exactly what was missing. I just realized for Catch-22, the reason I couldn't keep reading, it wasn't so much the lack of the plot, it was the lack of humanity. Like all of the characters were unique, but in ridiculous ways, not human ways.
I also get the impression that the author kind of has disdain for all of his characters.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But we need to loop Evangeline in. We keep talking
Evangeline.
Have you ever read any Albert Camus? Have you read The Stranger?
No.
I loved The Stranger when I read it as a teenager.
As
like
a
20-year-old. I don't know what to do with it now.
I was thinking of that one as cynical too.
Yeah. No,
the way the book opens, it says,
it's
my
one
mother...
of the best opening lines in literature.
Do you remember it word for word?
Different translation, but I believe... Okay, here's how it goes. My mother died today, or maybe yesterday. I'm not sure. And it goes on to talk about
the character?
And it goes on to talk about the delay in the post office.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's brilliantly written. So, I don't think I would want to hang out with Albert Camus at all.
And that's a character who sort of has this attitude like, nothing really matters.
Yeah.
Would you call that cynical, or would you call that sort of apathetic?
Because
they're related concepts, but they're not the same. Like cynical people are often apathetic, but I think there's a lot of overlap. I'm not sure they're precisely the same thing.
Yeah, that's true. He's more fatalistic and which fits with Albert Camus, major, like, strident atheist.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like cynicism is always looking for the worst in humanity, in the situation, in motivations, like looking for and expecting.
And assuming.
Assuming.
So it's very judgmental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's phony.
Yeah.
That's kind of the fun part. That's kind of the dangerous fun part, right? It's really fun to judge other people.
It is.
Because part of it is like, I'm so much better than all these people.
Yeah.
Woo! So, Evangeline, what do you think of as like the quintessential cynical story?
Well, funnily enough, what came to mind was actually a TV show. And this is not an endorsement.
Okay. That was
Let me
emphatic.
say that very strongly. But I think it's Amazon came out with a show called The Boys, which is superheroes. But they are all like controlled, owned, sort of like their image and their capability is owned by corporations.
Oh, so like
they're all
athletes.
like narcissistic monsters.
Yes,
Yeah.
and like every act, like, you know, the hero will go and save somebody, but they make sure that the cameras are there.
Oh,
and
wow.
like all of
that
this.
is cynical.
Oh, it's you know, and like Carl Urban is in it. He was in Lord of the Rings, so you know everybody's
Éomer.
like,
Yeah.
so we like
Éomer.
him.
Oh.
You know, that's what, and you know, he does have kind of a compelling storyline, so you're hooked. So, you know, we were watching and it just got to the point where I was like, I don't feel good. I feel bad and gross when I watch this show. And I'm no longer like, there's no longer enough of a, you know, rooting for the good guy in quotation marks to keep me here anymore. But I think it's interesting because it's like you could really see and feel that came out of the big Marvel, you know, we've had Marvel. Has it been 20 years?
I don't
Marvel,
know.
something
Iron
like
Man
that?
came out 2008, 2009.
So work.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so,
15
you know,
years.
that has been a thing for so long, and it feels like the Boys was like an answer to that.
Yeah.
And
it's definitely a conscious response to like Marvel.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel
but
cynical
gross.
about Marvel.
It's icky.
Yeah, so and to that point, I do think there is a really interesting idea there, right? Because like we mentioned, it is, you know, Marvel's dominated the pop culture landscape. So I do think having a series sort of consciously in response to that, I think that's worthwhile.
Yeah.
And also I do think it's an interesting idea of like, okay, what if superhumans actually did exist?
Right.
I think you can make a good argument like, yeah, they'd be entitled narcissists and it would be awful.
That's a really good point, because the trope is that superheroes are like these noble, like they're burdened with this glorious purpose.
Hey, you quoted Loki.
I did.
Dumping on Marvel.
Oh, I do. I do love Loki, though.
I love Loki also, but they're burdened with this glorious purpose, and unlike Loki, even though that is a Loki quote.
Yes. They're
what we're expected to believe, like for Superman, he's like this such pure-hearted, and you know, he has to save people, and I don't know.
It's like the best of our intentions, the best of humanity has gone into that icon of the superhero. And then, so this, you know, The Boys is like most definitely
what if they were like, you know, famous Hollywood actors or politicians or pro athletes?
Well, it's completely ignoring the
real people.
Actual people. Actual people who oftentimes turn into monsters when they're given all that fame and adulation.
And power.
Well, it ignores the truism that power corrupts.
Yep.
And so the idea that Superman wouldn't be a jerk is kind of laughable.
So yeah, all that is to say that I do think there's a really interesting idea at the core of The Boys, but it sounds like you grant that, but you think it kind of went off track despite the good idea.
Yeah, I just got to the point where like I said, I just like felt bad and gross. Like you know, there was just not enough good left. And you know, I am okay with dark literature.
Right.
I am okay with, you know, giving space to that. But yeah, there's just no reason to keep watching.
Well, and that really tracks with my experience reading Catcher in the Rye, native son and the stranger, very different feelings for each. Like it was almost like it was definitely more of a lighthearted annoyance with Catcher in the Rye. Because I'm like, look, kid, you know, but
you're just a kid.
Where native son was tragic and violent, and you just wanted to rescue Bigger from what he was doing to himself, but what society had done to him that made him do that to himself. Yeah. And then the stranger is just bleak. So yeah, I think the stranger probably does cross out of cynicism into just
they're connected though, right? Because again, if you're gonna, the stranger's core attitude is, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I can kill these people. I don't care.
Yeah, that's connected to cynicism.
Spoiler.
Yeah. Don't worry, he wasn't shook up about it.
Yeah, no, not at all.
He was cool with it.
Not at all.
But yeah, it's definitely cynicism adjacent, right?
Yes. Maybe that's where cynicism goes bad. It's been left to rot.
It ends in senseless murder.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a related point that I wanted to bring up with the whole cynicism thing. And again, this is me sort of letting people know what I'm prone to, where I remember I heard this podcast a while back talking about the difference between country music and like more usual like rock, pop music, all this other stuff.
No, sorry.
So I will say, well, on this point, I went through a phase several years back where it's like, okay, I'll try it. I've never really given country music a shot. I'm going to try to like it. So I like listen to country music. I gave it my darndest. Listeners, if you like country music, that's totally fine. You do you. I couldn't take it.
Okay, I will say there are variants. There are variants.
And listening to a podcast later on, I think they may have pinned down one of these things. Malcolm Gladwell podcast, so grain of salt.
Oh, go Malcolm. Yeah.
But he pointed out how country music is so sincere. Like
earnest.
It's earnest. Honest emotions worn on the sleeve. They will tell you how you feel to your face. And that makes me so uncomfortable. And I just, let me put this, I'm not exactly a words of affirmation guy, right? So, like, honest emotions make me so uncomfortable. And I realize it's a feeling within myself, okay? So something about cynicism, there's something where it's like, it's a veneer. It's sort of like this armor that you wear. So you don't have to, it's like, I'm not making a point. I'm making sort of a joke point, right? So there's this is a legitimately good book and movie. So it's called White Noise by Don DeLillo.
Don DeLillo?
Don DeLillo, yes.
Okay.
So the book is by Don DeLillo, and there's actually a movie version of it on Netflix starring Adam Driver, who is
I'm there.
He is fantastic in that movie.
Okay.
But basically, the book takes place during the 1980s, and it's told through the lens of this really pompous college professor. There's sort of this quasi-absurdist plot, and it's really interesting. I thought the book was really good. But one of the things I enjoyed about it was because it's told through the lens of this very pompous college professor, DeLillo's allowed to pontificate on all these points, but it's like, it's not him. He's talking through the lens of this pompous professor. So it's like this distancing thing. He can keep all of his serious points at arm's length because he's really lampooning this self-important pompous professor. And that really appeals to me. Just viscerally, the same part of me is like, let's not say real emotions to each other. Oh, Mom, don't make me tell my brothers why I love them at Christmas. This makes me so uncomfortable.
And what we're thankful for at Thanksgiving.
Oh, I can't do it.
I can't. Can we stop doing that around the table? I'm sorry. I'm thankful for lots of things, but don't make me say it around the table on the spot.
Do you really think that that's honest? Like,
that is the saving grace of cynicism. It thinks, right? Cynicism thinks that its goal is honesty.
Right. So that's a good point. There is a thin line between sincerity in going through the motions and saying what we all know we're supposed to say.
Yeah,
right?
Which is not honest.
Yeah.
But the cynic doesn't.
those can oftentimes bump into each other in real life.
Does not see the distinction. They don't believe in sincerity.
Yeah, because oftentimes it's going through the motions to say what we need to say.
Right.
The cynic would falsely conclude then that the sincere thing doesn't exist.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Even though both things often exist and both can be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Good points.
I had a thought earlier and it disappeared. That's okay.
Now I'm thinking about all of those moments in Thanksgiving, the holidays, and the
well, that's what derailed
this
me.
This is what I have to say.
No, we were
thankful for my family.
we were at a Friendsgiving last year, and it's actually funny because the parents seated me next to the teenage boy, or across from the teenage boy. I found out later it was completely intentional because they know that I was a teacher and that I absolutely love teenagers. And we did the mom stood up and she goes, "We're going to do," and I was like, "No." And she had us go around, and it was so funny because I was watching this kid the whole time, and you can imagine him. He's Holden Caulfield without the red cap. Yeah. He had no bones in his body. He was so slouched. And when they got to him, when it was his turn, I knew exactly what he was going to say because he was staring at his water glass the whole time. And so he said, "I'm thankful for water." And it was awesome. The happy ending to that is by the end of the evening, I had him on my side of the table showing me pictures of the play he was in and teaching me sign language. So there. So cynics, like you said, it is really, truly, it's a veneer, unless you're Albert Camus and you hate everyone.
They just resist the imposition. I mean, maybe not cynics.
They resist vulnerability.
But yeah, well, I mean, because I'm just thinking about that kid and just myself.
Yeah.
And resisting the imposition of a manufactured emotion.
Exactly.
Please
manufactured is the perfect word.
Don't require me to manufacture.
Yeah.
Yes. To play along.
An emotion.
Yes.
Because that's not authentic.
Right. Now you're making me want to reread Catcher in the Rye. No, I don't.
You're like, no, let's not do it.
Let's not go that
Let's not go that far. I just got 5 books from Thrift Books today. I have to need to stay up all night.
You have plenty to do.
Yeah.
So something related to that is a concept that is, I think, it's adjacent to this. That's a concept of satire, right? Mm-hmm. Where I actually heard Karen Swallow Pryor give a podcast interview about this, where satire, rightly understood, is mockery of vice.
Yes.
Right? So you can see this in, classic examples. So, there's Jonathan Swift, both in, A Modest Proposal, which is lampooning the terrible conditions that the Irish were treated by the English government. There's The Rape of the Lock, which is lampooning sort of frivolousness in the upper classes. So there's lots of examples of that. I think we can all think of several examples of it done well, in many examples of it done poorly, right? So what are we, when we're looking at satire, which I do think is cynic adjacent.
I agree.
What are we looking at? Good satire versus bad satire?
Don't Look Up.
Don't Look Up.
Did you see Don't Look Up?
Oh, no. I thought you were giving me advice. Like, what? Do I have something in my nose? What's
I saw that.
Was that good or bad?
She's making a face that says she disagrees with me because I thought it was hilarious.
Oh, really?
Did you like it? No?
No.
Oh, okay. I like Don't Look Up. It was a satire about media and climate crisis and stuff like that. I thought, anyway.
Yeah.
So what about that did you like? I will say,
did you see it?
It was one of those things I saw the trailer, I was like, no thanks, Val.
I watched it because somebody...
I don't want Leonardo DiCaprio lecturing me about literally anything.
No, but they weren't lecturing. That was what was funny. But whatever. I don't know.
There's this really great bit by this comedian Nate Bargatze where he's like, I follow Leonardo DiCaprio, see what his life's like. what he tweets is like, every year, 1 million sharks are killed by humans.
Yeah.
No solution. It's like
Leonardo DiCaprio is Holden Caulfield, basically.
But anyway, go on.
No, Don't Look Up. I thought, to me, it worked because in some respects, they were poking fun at themselves, because media in general, and like, so I don't know. I thought it worked because I thought it was funny. Especially the anchors. Didn't you think when the news anchors were like, was it too dark for you?
I can't even remember.
It's very dark. It is very, because some satire is light. This was very dark.
Ooh, I just thought of a good example. I'm glad you said that.
Well, Thank You for Smoking is really good satire. Have you seen Thank You for Smoking?
I have not. I've read, so that's based on, what's his name? Christopher Buckley's books.
Okay.
Which I actually kind of like.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Is he related to William
F. Buckley's son. He's a famous satirist. Yeah.
Well, chip off the old block there.
So and that gets to, I'll go again. I have not seen Don't Look Up. I'm basing not watching.
You don't have to. I'm not saying it's
I'm basing, I kind of had this visceral reaction against it when I saw the trailer, right? But one of the reasons I had this visceral reaction was my assumption, maybe it was unfair.
That's
it's
okay.
like, oh, I don't want these rich actors lecturing me, right?
So you were being cynical.
I kind of was like, sorry, Leo, I don't really care what you have to say about anything. But that could be but that's also a danger, right? Because when you write a satire, you are sort of assuming this higher moral ground.
Oh,
basically, like,
good point.
I'm looking down on this. Ideally, you're mocking a vice. Often it degenerates into you mocking other people. Like, these people are stupid.
And I'm superior.
Smart. Yes.
Yeah, Holden Caulfield. Yeah.
Yeah, so...
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Satire really does assume a moral superiority.
So there's like a pride.
Or intellectual, at least.
Yeah. There's just a pride aspect to cynicism and to some, I mean, some satire?
Yeah.
All satire? Do you think that there's a pride?
I think...
element of pride?
I think whenever you set out to write a satire, I think that's just a risk, right? Like, it's very easy to let your pride take over you. So I think if you're going to do it well, you have to be very circumspect about that.
But that's why I was saying what I liked about Don't Look Up is I saw elements of them poking fun at themselves, at Hollywood itself. So to me, that's why that worked. No,
that's a good point. So basically, you're saying that I may have been too quick to dismiss.
I'm not saying this is Leo. Like a super important thing that you need to go. Like, no, this is not me. This is not my Piranesi speech. It's not. You don't need to watch it. For satire, that just popped to my head.
Yeah. So here's a good satire that I really enjoyed. Kind of want to talk through it to see if there's a good reason why I enjoyed it. This movie, The Death of Stalin. Have either of you seen it?
No.
I thought it was hilarious. So it's a dark comedy. It's basically about Stalin dying and
Clearly.
all of his, sorry for the spoiler, guys, but Stalin dies and all of his underlings are sort of vying for power to sort of take it over. So obviously it's satirical in a number of different ways. Obviously, it's mocking the Soviet government during 1940s, 1950s,
right?
Which was, sorry if this is a hot take, I don't care for the Soviet government during that time at all. I think they were bad.
Okay, McCarthy.
So, I know, right? Sorry to lob all these bombs. I think Stalin was bad, but
what?
So there's that, just showing the system. But it's also sort of the banality of evil, right? Because these men aren't shown as like these great super geniuses. They're dudes. They have petty grievances. They have these sort of petty little things they're trying to get to. They're like trying to walk fast to get to in front of the cameras first. They're like dishing on each other, backbiting. So it's all seeing all these great men of the Soviet Empire just like dishing on each other and being so petty. It's really, really funny. And I wonder if part of it is it just like, oh, here's an obvious target,
Right.
hopefully, we all agree that Stalin was bad and his regime was bad. So let's mock that vice. Is it that simple? Because if it's that simple, like that's not super hard to do. It's just an easy target. Or is there something? Sorry, I'm just talking out loud.
You're talking out loud?
Ah, darn it.
Wow. Sorry.
I'm thinking out loud.
Sorry.
I'm thinking in my brain and talking out loud about how, was there something deeper to it? I do think it gets at something more universal and human. Just about showing the sort of everyday pettiness and rivalries that we do as humans, even if it's played out on a quote unquote grander scale. So I think that's why it succeeds, but I don't know, maybe I just thought it was funny and I felt good to laugh at the bad communists. I don't know.
So the stated target is safe, but they're really hitting a wider, well, like you said, it's more universal.
Yeah, so it's not just the Soviets that are bad. It's, oh, look, they're just like the rest of us. They're petty, they're backbiting, they're dishing on each other, they're sort of nudging past each other in line. There's all these sort of everyday human vices, even at this sort of absurd situation.
Right, but they get the audience's trust by aiming it at a group that no one would defend.
Yes.
One would hope.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're running a little low on time. I have one final spiel ready, but I don't want to, if either of you have a cynical work we'd like to discuss. Well,
originally but in the green room, we were talking about, is Flannery O'Connor cynical?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
but I don't, by the way we've defined it, I don't think she is cynical.
Okay, so let's do that, because I think this is worthwhile, because I think both of you thought of her as like an example of cynical author. So what about her, Mandy, made you think, okay, this is an example of cynical stories?
Well, I think I wasn't really defining it the way that we have refined the definition through the podcast, because I was just thinking of like dark. And what were you thinking, Evangeline?
I was thinking of the way that she portrays the ugliness of humanity, like with a really unrelenting lens,
Right. So why do we love her?
I don't know.
So do you,
I do know, but I don't know.
So would you describe
because
her
I
as...
do love her.
Would you describe her as cynical, Evangeline?
As prideful? Is that one of the things that we...
That was one of the...
satire.
It's one of the sort of dangers. So
so what did we settle on?
It's riding shotgun for cynicism.
Well, and I probably should point out that just in the past couple of years, some letters of Flannery O'Connor have come out that are quite problematic.
She was an imperfect person.
She was a very imperfect person.
She had some severe faults, yes.
But we're talking
But I think she was exploring that through her fiction.
Yeah,
and I don't want to give her a
I will
pass.
say she recognized them as faults too.
I agree.
Yeah.
But she laid stuff out there just plainly and said, look at this, look at how ugly it is. Is that cynicism or just honesty?
Yeah, good question. And is there, I guess, like, I'm always looking for sparks of hope and beauty. And maybe because, I do see those in her stories.
Yeah, right. So I think part of it is, I think she has the same risks as a lot of the authors we talked about who are cynical. I think maybe her saving grace here is, I think she's just a better writer than these other ones were.
Well, yeah.
Like, I think she succeeds in a way that, like, J.D. Salinger fails or Joseph Heller fails, because she does have a moral center that she's coming at it and is more skilled in presenting that. Like, she's unflinching in mocking vice, right? Mocking all of these different aspects of people. But I feel like she's able to do that because she has this moral spine and maybe she's just a better writer than the others are. I don't know.
And
Like
I don't ever feel like she is coming from a position where, words fail.
Like the judgment aspect
Right.
of cynicism.
She's not, I don't feel like she's putting herself above. She's just going, look at how much we stink and how much we need grace.
Yeah. And even getting back to the letters about her fault, like she recognized those as faults within herself.
Oh,
but
100%.
She struggled and she had those very glaring faults.
Glaring.
So she clearly
Yes.
viewed herself as a fellow sinner along with all these other people in her fiction.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I come back to what we were saying before, like maybe Evangeline, there's sort of a comfort in being able to recognize the truth in what you're reading.
Mm-hmm.
But because we have the context
Right.
of the future restoration and redemption, which she also had, maybe that comes through in ways that we can't quite articulate.
Hard to define. Yeah.
Yeah. But I will say, the story that I mentioned in the green room that I cannot recommend, I'm sorry, because it just is too dark and it ripped my heart out and then shredded it, is called The Lame Shall Enter First. If anyone wants to tell me I'm wrong, fine, you can find me on the socials, but that one just killed me dead. But yeah, good man is hard to find with the ending. She would have been a good woman if a gun had been in her face her whole life.
And and that very final glimpse of the grandmother, who was an extremely judgmental person. That's kind of the whole...
She was a bad person who Flannery O'Connor very viciously mocks throughout the story, right?
She's almost she's the villain in the story about killers. How is
That's pretty bad. She's a grandma.
And she's the grandma.
That's pretty funny. But, there is that moment at the end where she, it just breaks through, like humanity. Breaks through
Yes.
all of her awfulness, the awfulness of the moment. And it is so awful.
Yeah, it's so awful.
It's so awful.
And again, I think this goes through where you'd see maybe a lesser artist leave it at that. Like, look at this old lady. She sucks. We don't.
I know.
But she sucks.
There you go.
Where she uses this old lady with her obvious vices that, again, are really viciously lampooned for the purpose of a larger point, right?
Yeah, she hits you with grace.
Exactly.
With that character.
Exactly.
Like, I couldn't do that.
Only Flannery O'Connor could make the serial killer the
means of grace.
The means of grace. And the one with the wise words who speaks the truth at the end. Sorry, spoiler again, but whatever.
Yeah.
Good man is hard to find. Yeah. Let me tell you.
Let me tell you.
Her titles, man.
There's a cynical title for you.
There's a cynical title. Yeah.
All right. So there we have it. We're actually running low on time.
Darn it.
Just so listeners know, we don't have time for it today, but I have a whole album side on why The Simpsons is good and Family Guy is bad.
A whole B-side? Is that what you meant to say?
I'm going to turn it into a whole podcast episode later.
Wait, which is good?
Simpsons is good, Family Guy is bad.
Oh, I haven't even watched Family Guy.
And by Simpsons, I mean Simpsons seasons 2 through season 8. I have very strong opinions.
Honey,
on that.
I'm so old. I started watching The Simpsons when all it was the little intermission things in the Tracy Ullman show.
Yeah. So, listeners, just so you know, I have a whole episode planned on that. But
okay, we're ready.
The larger point there is there are lots of dimensions to this, I think, where it's not just cynicism bad, cynicism good. It's how is it being used within the story? Is it being used to let the author and by extension the audience congratulate themselves on being smarter and more sophisticated than the rest of the world? Or is it trying to shine a light on a larger point? And that is something that takes a lot of discernment, I think, if you're reading and especially if you're writing something like that. All right. Well, there we go. And as y'all can probably tell, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Fire's down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you have polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have just a little bit of extra time right now, please rate and review the show on iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.